Great. We have a few more panelists that will be joining us, but just to kick off, would be great to have all of you introduce yourselves, as well as introduce the organization you're working for. And then I have a few questions to kick off the discussion. We do want to make this interactive. So as an attendee, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A or into the chat function, and we'll leave some time at the end to bring those to the panelists. So maybe if we want to start with Satoshi.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Satoshi. I'm a Japanese, but I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm just currently back to Tokyo for about a month, so I'm attending from Tokyo. We are running a VC fund based in Lagos in Nigeria and Nairobi in Kenya and Tokyo in Japan. We have in total $30 million, and in the past 2 years, we have invested in more than 80 startups in the seed stage. And Tunisia is one of our important markets where we have so far invested in 4 startups. And I would like, we have a very good overview of the market by comparing Tunisia against other markets in Africa. So I hope I can share a lot of insight with you today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Satoshi. Maya?
Yes, hello. So Maya Borreg-Dashaban. So I'm a lawyer in Tunisia and France. I work a lot with international investor. I was also involved in the drafting of the Startup Acts, and I'm assisting now the Smart Capital, Mr. Alaya Bataib, on the structuring of the fund of funds.
Great, I think we can go to Alaya then. Sorry, Alaya, you're still on mute. There we go.
Hi, how are you, everybody? So thank you very much for the invite, and I'm extremely glad really to join these efforts with CrossBoundary. In fact, I'm the managing director of Smart Capital, and Smart Capital is the national contractor of Startup Tunisia, which is managing, which is in fact willing, or it's in charge of putting Tunisia in the crossroad of Africa, MENA, and the Mediterranean region, and as a startup nations. So we will give you details later. Thank you.
Thank you, Alaya. And Zaid, I think you've already introduced yourself, but we've already also been joined by Yahya. Yahya, if you want to just introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So sorry, I had a call and I had to go. But I'm back. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Yahya Boulel. I'm a co-founder and CEO at GoMyCode. GoMyCode is an edtech that trains people on tech skills. Today we are operating in 9 countries in Africa, and we have around 2,000 active students. We are 100 people working on this project, and we started GoMyCode almost 4 years ago. Prior to GoMyCode, I've done 2 internships in the States in Silicon Valley as a game developer and app developer. And I spent a lot of time traveling between Silicon Valley and Tunis. And so I always had the idea of starting school that brings the spirit of Silicon Valley in Tunis. But we started with a very simple idea 4 years ago, and we kept iterating the product. We kept iterating what we do, and we grew from 15 to 2,000 students from 1 to, or today we have around 300 teachers. So yeah.
Great, thanks so much, Aya. Nice, thank you all for joining us, and nice to have you all. So just to kick off, Satoshi, maybe first question to you. As you mentioned, you invest across Africa, and one of the questions we tend to get from investors is, why Tunisia? It's quite a small country. It's just 12 million people. So would be curious to know about how you chose to invest in Tunisia, and maybe mention a few examples of the kinds of companies you've looked at.
Great. Yeah, thank you for asking. So I think the Tunisian market is very strategically located between Europe and at the center of MENA region and sandwiched by Europe and the African continent. So we are not just looking at the Tunisian market, but whenever we invest in startups from Tunisia, we are usually attracted by the huge market surrounding Tunisia. And actually, most of the startups we have invested has a potential to expand beyond Tunisia. So we don't take Tunisia as a single market, but we combine surrounding markets as one market when we invest in Tunisian startup. And secondly, I think the competition is still low for the funding in Tunisia. So usually the valuation of the startups are cheaper given the quality of the founders and also the quality of the products or services they are developing. And if you look at maybe Egypt or Nigeria, Kenya, the valuation has been skyrocketing until COVID crisis. And I feel that overvalued startups have reduced a little bit during the COVID, but I think Egypt is booming again. And relatively, I think Tunisians, you can do a very good shopping, very good investment in Tunisian startups. And I'm always very impressed by the quality of the founders in Tunisia. I think education system is quite high in Tunisia, but also most of these founders have proven their quality after studying in Europe and working in Europe, and they decided to come back to Tunisia to start their startups. And because they have exposure to European markets, I think they know how to compete not only in Tunisia but also in Europe. And I think the great example from our portfolio companies is a company called Next Protein, and they are producing insect protein for the fish meals. So usually the fish meals for aquaculture is produced by fish. So aquaculture sounds like very sustainable, but it's not sustainable actually as long as they are using fish to feed fish. So they are going to replace this fish meal with the insect protein produced from food waste in Tunisia. And the founders have great experience in studying and working in Europe and the US, first of all. And while their factory production site would be located in Tunisia, where they can source food waste at a very cheap cost, and labor cost is cheaper. So their capex for the processing plant of this insect protein is much cheaper in Tunisia compared to other countries. And they are the only non-European insect protein startup allowed to export their product to EU. So this is a great advantage of Next Protein. And actually, we have looked at the similar startup based in Japan, and we were quite shocked when we found that actually Next Protein has a better technology at cheaper cost, and they already have proven that their quality is validated by EU. So some of the Japanese companies already invested in a similar startup in Japan. And when I presented Next Protein to these Japanese companies, some of them became very keen. So when we invested in Next Protein, we also brought another Japanese company listed on Tokyo Stock Exchange. So I think this is a great example. So you need someone who can actually connect these great Tunisian startups to other investors. And we have skin in the game because we ourselves are also a VC investor investing in startups. So, but this co-investment by the Japanese company really validated how Tunisian startup is quite attractive when they can target European market, not only Tunisian market, and the quality of the founders and services products are proven. So I think this is a great point. And also, I want to mention that when these startups are selling products to Europe, they can earn their revenue in hard currency in euro or in US dollars. So I think this is also great advantage. For example, when I invest in Nigerian startups, Nigerian market is huge because the population is 200 million, but all the services and products have to be targeted to the Nigerian consumers who would pay in Nigerian naira, which is very unstable because Nigeria produces a lot of oil and their local currency is always linked to the oil price. So even if their revenue grows in Nigerian naira, in the US, when we convert it into US dollars, sometimes revenue is decreasing. So I think so. From the portfolio perspective, if you have some exposure to Tunisian startups, you can, offset some currency fluctuation risk and also political risk. So I think these are the great points about the Tunisian startups.
Great, thanks so much, Satoshi. That's a really great perspective and comparison to some of the other markets. Yeah, question to you on a similar point. What do you think makes, from a company's perspective, what are the competitive advantages that you think you and other entrepreneurs have by incubating in Tunisia, particularly given, your rapid expansion to a few of the neighboring countries recently?
Yeah, I mean, especially when we started expanding our model and product in other countries, that made us more understand what's also unique and what's really been valuable for us in Tunisia. And I mean, the first thing is, I'm going to be really concrete. The first thing is obviously cost of hiring versus the quality of talent you hire. And I think it's the best in Africa. I think it's one of the best in Africa. Cost of hiring is really, really low compared to other countries in the same region. Cost of living also, it's really, really different. It's always cost of hiring or living versus the quality of living or versus the quality of the profile you hire. And that's specifically really good because you can build something really great at a lower cost in Tunis by something, it's tech product or hardware or so the cost of product development can be really low versus it can be really good also quality-wise. And when you deploy another country, you don't have, you're not gonna reinvest in a product another time. So mainly in our case, we build our tech, our content. We basically built the GoMyCode product in Tunis, and we scaled after the operations around. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is. It really improved for the past year. We really improved with the Startup Act framework. There is a lot of effort, happening. The more we expand to other countries, the more we understand also that a lot of countries are untapped and they still have a really small startup ecosystem, and it's not necessarily as it's seen in media, or it's relatively very small comparing to Tunis. And I think we have a really interesting and a good growth trajectory for a really good ecosystem, and that's a really good energy that you cannot find anywhere. And I think part of this it came with the revolution, maybe because after the revolution we had really good energy and we had a lot of people coming from outside Tunis, from France, from the States, coming to Tunis to start things, and that's actually how Cogit co-working spaces started and how all the startups at Cogit started. One of them, Expandia, that recently just raised. So overall, we had really good energy that is really unique, I think, in the region. And I mean, after like I think what's in top of mind is like the cost of. It's the cost of hiring, and from the developers, from the managers, from the designers, and that's been really critical for us. So I would say that I mean, also we have sun, we have beaches, we have good food, so that helps, because if you cannot pay your staff really good salaries at first because it's a startup and you're limited by the cost, you can at least offer them a really nice dinner at La Goulette, nice fish and nice sun at a relatively lower cost. So that's that's good.
Yeah. Great, yeah, that's really helpful, and I actually was previously in Nigeria as well, and I think there are things that can be learned and implemented across country, right? I think there's a bit of an artificial separation between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. North Africa, understandably, culturally is much more similar to the MENA region, but there are a lot of similarities. So I do think, Yahya, to what you were saying, there's things to be learned both from Tunisia to other markets and from other.
Sorry, there is something else, which is the market size, which is the market size in Tunis is still small. So, first, it's good for testing. So it's good to test an MVP here in Tunis because first the market it's small, it's like 10 million. Second, we have a really good middle class. And that's not necessarily the same in markets where it's really chaotic, like in Lagos or like in Cairo, where it's really crazy. So in Tunis, it's a really good environment place to get started, to build an MVP, to test the MVP. And I think it's the best place in Africa, honestly, to start with an MVP, to test the MVP, and after grow it in other countries. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Yahya. And I think that's a great segue to Alaya for Smart Capital. Yahya touched a bit on the new regulation, the new promotion for startup ecosystem. We have the fund of funds. So if you could maybe provide us with a bit of context setting on what are the new regulations, why is it a good environment for investors? I think that would be great.
Thank you so much, Kirsika. And I'm going really to follow on what Satoshi and Yahya has been really saying, about the environment. In fact, I used to be, among the diaspora, internationally, and myself also, I came back to Tunisia in 2011. And by chance, instead of starting my own business and startup, I was called to be a member of the government. So I was the Secretary of State for International Cooperation and Investment, where I was really, of course, trying really to bring, what other countries has been really doing in terms of boosting and fostering, the economy, the innovative and technology ecosystem, in general. But later, of course, I joined the Esprit School of Engineering, where I started the first academic incubator in Tunisia, where I was extremely committed, to help the talents of the school to convert themselves, from projet de fin d'études to startup, etc. And I'm extremely glad that I could succeed really converting, 5 projets de fin d'études to startups. And some of them are in Silicon Valley, Ontario, Canada, Berlin, Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and Lyon with the big booster, accelerator, etc. So as Yahya and Satoshi has been saying, there is a culture. I found that there is a culture of entrepreneurship, of startup, in Tunisia. And what the government has been really doing and trying in 2015 is indeed to put the legal framework, the financial mechanism to do so. So in order really to put this in place, and I really profit of this occasion to thank Maya, because Maya used to be in the first task force of Startup Act, in Tunisia since the 2016. And she put, she knew that with the civil society, the public sector, the private sector, they've been really working together in order really to put, the Startup Act. I'd like really that we share the screen with the, you see my screen? No, the other one, the presentation of the, you see my screen?
I did, but I think it's gone now again.
Yeah.
I'm showing, the Startup Tunisia, which is the overall program to make Tunisia a country of startups at the crossroads of the Mediterranean region in Africa. In fact, the program is, you see the screen?
Not anymore.
No.
Not anymore. How come? What happened?
I think you shared it, but then it stopped sharing.
You see something?
Not yet.
Otherwise, I send you the presentation. So please, open the slide number, the presentation of SC CrossBoundary, the slide number 2. So yeah, absolutely, yeah. So that's slide. So in fact, the Smart Capital is really managing, 3 programs. One of is called the Startup Act, which is a unique legal framework to promote startups, both those who are launching the business in Tunisia or those who are willing to come in Tunisia and to launch their own startup. This is, in fact, a program which is based on a merit label, label, label in French, which is a distinction, due to your the innovative side of the product, and the most importantly is the scalability of the product. In fact, there is 5 criteria Two of them are the innovative of the technology and the scalability. So I mean, Smart Capital is in charge of all the process of labeling. I mean, the innovative startups, giving them the advantage, and also, of course, profit of this occasion to make all the data collection and analysis about the startup ecosystem in Tunisia. The second pillar, which is as important, is the VC ecosystem. In fact, I mean, in that pillar, there is, in fact, two mechanisms. The first one is the fund of fund with 200 million euro target, I mean, within the next 5 years. So the fund of fund now is being launched with 40 million euro as the first closing. By June, we are going to reach 75 million, and hopefully by the end of the year, we reach the 100 million euro. Hopefully, of course, we still are contacting maybe limited partners for that. Of course, the objective is to create venture capital funds in all the stages: the seed stage, the early stage, and the later stage. So in order really to follow, I mean, the growth of the startup in all the stages. We have an innovative program on that, is what we call the VC Lab. We are very, very open to the diaspora. We are very open to young and professional teams who never probably create, I mean, a venture fund before. So we are launching with our partners what we call the VC Lab, which is an incubator for the general partners to be able really to master the best practices of the fund management companies for startups in early seed and later stage. We also are putting in place, probably it will take some time, a guarantee fund in order really to help, I mean, the LPs, I mean, be a part of the fund of funds. This is the second pillar. The third pillar is what we call the startup ecosystem. And in all countries who succeed, really, their startup culture and their startup, how to say, success, are those who succeed on putting, I mean, in a very aggressive and very competent ecosystem through the incubator, accelerator, the startup studio, co-working space, name it, you know. So, and for this, of course, I mean, Smart Capital is extremely keen with their partner, the World Bank, the GIZ, Expertise France, Innovi, with the European Union, with a lot of grants where we can really, of course, help the supporting organism. I mentioned the incubator, accelerator, etc., to get, I mean, funding to be able really to run their programs, to coach, I mean, their startups, etc., and also to help them also getting connected internationally through all the programs in Silicon Valley, in Europe, in wherever in the world where there is a chance for startups really to meet investors, to pitch, I mean, their projects, etc. In fact, there is one thing which I summarize in, is that the fund of fund in Tunisia is labeled in euro. And this is unique, the first time in the history of Tunisia that we have a fund which is labeled in hard currency. And this indeed, as has been mentioned by Satoshi and also Yahya, is to help Tunisian startup really getting also, or to invest, I mean, internationally, to get a base in Europe, to get base in the US, to get base in Africa, to connect, I mean, worldwide, and to, of course, to not only to gain market, but also to how to say, to get new partners and to grow within new partners. So these are the three main things that, of course, we are actually putting in place in order really to marry the dynamism that we are living, I mean, these days, I mean, in Tunisia, and to foster such a culture of innovation and technology entrepreneurship in the country.
Great, thank you, Alaya, for that. That was very helpful and insightful and great context for everyone, particularly international investors that maybe aren't very familiar with the recent regulatory changes and improvements. So just on that same point, Maya, I know you've been very involved with change in regulation, the Startup Act, and helping companies and investors getting foreign capital. And one of the questions we also get is around the administrative burden of investing in Tunisia. We've experienced it ourselves in setting up a company and meeting all the requirements. So if you could add a bit of color on what it is like for foreign investors to invest, and what are some of the tools that they could use to help in this process, that would be great.
So thank you, Kritika. I try to be as optimistic as my friends before me, and trying to always the lawyer, they say we are the barrier, but we'll try to present another picture of the law, and also saying here that one important thing is that the law has been trying to follow this dynamism that that my colleague were talking about. So even though the picture is not always as clear as it can be, but indeed, there is long and old framework on investment in Tunisia, because even before the recent changes, Tunisia has also as Mr. Lahbib told it, and the FIPA is also an evidence of that. So a law on investment is and trying also to push offshore activities. So it's quite an old framework. But very good initiatives also that came these last years. Also very interesting initiatives, not only on the content of the law, but especially on the way that it was done. We saw the dynamism of Yahya and all the startups that we have in Tunisia, and this very young population that is after the revolution trying to have some very dynamic projects. Have pushed also the governments and the administration in order to put in place the Startup Act. So in addition to the general framework on investment and so on, there was also a law that was adopted in order to promote startups and also to facilitate their living and their initiatives, because it was not possible to change everything. So it was more a step-by-step initiative. And so the first step was put in place in order to create a favorable ecosystem for startups in the on the tax side. So with advantages with tax advantages, social advantages as well, and even also to trying to promote initiatives by giving a scholarship to entrepreneurs that would like to launch startups and then to leave their employment for a period. So this initiative was put in place, and the fact that it was a success was also the fact that it was taken. It inspires other countries. In Algeria, for example, a Startup Act was put in place. In other countries in Africa, also they are talking about putting in place a Startup Act. So it was an initiative that came. It was bottom up and not the contrary. So that was one of the very positive point, because for the first time, the law came from the ground, so now, the strength is trying to follow. It's the first step. I hope that other things are coming after. There is also the crowdfunding, which is following. Hopefully, as open as the Startup Act was. The rest is already existing. It's possible to have shareholder agreements, to structure investment. Of course, there are still other things coming, other laws coming, but it's a first good steps and very solid.
Great. Thanks so much, Maya. I think that's really helpful to sort of know the origin and know sort of the objective. And there's a lot of different parts of this that are helpful, like holding hard currency bank accounts for startups to protect against, reducing currency, the stipends for entrepreneurs, which is really exciting to see young entrepreneurs go towards this field. So question for Yahya as well as Satoshi. As an entrepreneur, what has it been like to work with international investors? Because I know you've recently attracted capital from folks that are not based in Tunisia to invest in Tunisian startups. And Satoshi, as an international investor, what has the experience been like to invest in startups within Tunisia? Yahya, if you want to go first.
Yeah, actually, so we raised almost a year ago our pre-Series A, raised around a 650,000 USD with investors who are based in Tunisia, but also investors outside Tunis. One of them is Wamda Capital in the Middle East. Also with some of the angel investors like Khaled Halibi or like who invested at Uber, Deliveroo. The only thing I can recall, and this is early, right? This is these investors. First thing they more believe in the entrepreneur and they believe more in the product and the trend. So they took a lot of risk because one of the things I remember is for investors to invest outside Tunis, they need to go through the central bank and they need to submit their documents through the central bank. First, where it's all French, so for investors in the Middle East, no idea. So we had to hire local law firm. I had to hire a law firm in the Middle East to verify and check, and the whole thing was not super clear. So first, there's no clear guarantee or comfort for investors to invest outside Tunis, because first it's not clear for them if they can get dividends, for example, outside Tunis after and there's a lot of ambiguity around that. So I think for a larger ticket, it would be very, very, very complicated. But for a ticket of 200,000 USD, and I don't think they were very, very, they didn't give it a lot of attention and all. But I think if you're raising for a 5 million plus ticket, I think it's very, very hard. It's very complicated to invest in Tunisia directly because simply there is no clear insights and data on for investors outside Tunis on how to invest the right. One of the this is really straightforward. Like the website is in French, everything is in French. There is no documentation in English. As simple as that. So. And that can create some sense of frustration. So that's one of the things. I remember it was really there, and we had to spend a lot of time just managing the communication between the investors in Dubai and the investors in Tunis. But that was the experience. Yeah, I would say that. But now we're actually doing right now and we're trying to close our Series A in the upcoming 1 month. And that's a different plan because it's very hard to raise in Tunisia, because one of the things we learned also, if you want to do expansion and expand in other countries, is you need USD and you need euros, and so you cannot expand with dinars, and so the whole convertibility of our currency and that can be really challenging for investors and also for startups, because you can make and generate revenue as a startup in Tunis, but unable to invest outside Tunis, and that's a big thing.
Yeah, thanks for that, Yahya. And just the same question to you, Satoshi. We've had this concern from investors. So how did you navigate that? And I guess what advice would you have for investors that are figuring out that process?
Sure. So yeah, just to be clear, out of our 4 investment into Tunisian startups, only one have headquarters in Paris. So the 3 startups, we had to invest directly into Tunisia, 2 in straight equity and 1 in convertible notes. And with all these 3 investment, we actually struggled with the language written in French. So the registration process, all the investors need to register at Central Bank of Tunisia. And yeah, as I don't speak French, I had to ask for help from our portfolio companies from the Tunisian startups to actually, fill the information on behalf of us. So that was a bit stressful situation. And also, on one hand, it's a comfort for us to have kind of legal structure for investors to invest in Tunisia. But I think there's always like a trade-off between investor protection versus efficiency and convenience. And once we, register at Central Bank, then we wired the cap fund into the Tunisian bank account of the startup, but that money will be held in escrow. And there are still further steps to actually move the fund that we invested from the escrow to the Tunisian startup. And we have to go through another process in French with documentation. And that was quite, stressful situation for both investors and Tunisian startups. So I think there is still a room for improvement. And maybe, I think the Tunisian regulators would take more feedback from both investors and startups to make this process more efficient. But I think you're on the good track to give enough confidence to the investors. And maybe apart from this administrative and legal structure issue, I think always the language is quite a big hurdle for the international investors because, if you look at the business models in Tunisia, you have both French and Arabic. And I had to actually ask other Tunisian investors or my Tunisian friends to share their Tunisian eyes on behalf of me, because sometimes I don't know how much of for example, the business is done in French and in Arabic. And if the product is only in French, I wasn't so sure if that product should also be in Arabic. And, so it's always better for the investors to have someone on the ground in Tunisia to give a local perspective when they're doing due diligence. And yeah, I'm talking a bit, negative side because I talked a lot of positive sides at the beginning of this panel. And maybe another thing is that it's better for the international investors to think about who else you would like to bring together into that same funding round. Because in Tunisia, I think if you look at the demand versus supply of the capital, always demand is much higher and supply is in short. And because of this, sometimes you just invest and wait for other investors to join. And if the startups keeps burning the cash, maybe you just have to invest again if other investors don't show up. So I think if you have a great conviction in a startup, I think you should bring other co-investors. Tunisian ecosystem is still developing and growing, so you can just wait for other investors to show up. So I think that is another kind of challenge in the current Tunisian ecosystem from the investors' perspective. And maybe I said I invested in straight equity in 2 startups and 1 in convertible note, and I wasn't so sure about enforceability of the convertible note in the specific form that we signed in for that Tunisian startup. So I wish I could take some advice, legal advice from the Tunisian regulator or investment promotion office, or if you can prepare a kind of format, a legal format of convertible note that is accepted in Tunisia and legally enforceable in Tunisia, I think that would also help the investors a lot.
Thanks so much, Satoshi. Just one quick follow-up before moving to Maya, who I'm sure has some thoughts around some of these concerns on capital controls, on structures, on templating these documents. Do you feel like it's getting easier as you are making future investments, like the knowledge you're gaining has been additive, so that it's worth the investment, and as you go along, it becomes easier to make future investments? And this is a question for you, Satoshi.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. So could you repeat your question?
Yeah. Does it get easier as you make the first investment to then make follow-on investments because you've met some of the registration requirements, and maybe the first is a big hurdle, but once you get over that, does the future investment get easier?
Yeah. So now I'm used to the process of, like, putting our fund into escrow, and we know what forms we have to fill. So yeah, after our first investment, I didn't have any surprise at all for my second investment and the third investment. But at the same time, I feel like there's a way to improve the process. So maybe I should reach out to the regulators more proactively from my side. But I think it's also, the central bank can also send me a survey form whether I was happy with the process or something, so that you can automatically aggregate different feedback from the investors. So I think, if you can add that kind of service, I think it would be great.
Great.
I'd add more also on this. I think I think a lot of investors would be eventually willing to take some risk and navigate the ambiguity, but I don't think, one, it's sustainable through time, because once you raise the seed funds and you grow a bit the company, and after you think about a much bigger ticket, I don't think with the current model you would do it eventually. Tunis, you'll find ways to get outside Tunis if you want to bring much, and this is really not good also for Tunisia, because if you had just better laws and better regulation, companies would simply raise funds in Tunis. So I think the model now, maybe it's working with a lot of investors taking a lot of risk for small tickets and for lower investment. But if you want to build something really sustainable and something that will drive a lot of investment through time and help also companies grow from seed to Series C and Series, we need different regulation and different laws, I think.
Yeah.
Kirtika, let me, follow up with what Satoshi and Yahya has been saying, is that things are really improving. I mean, with the ecosystem now, with the three pillars that I've been really mentioning. In fact, I mean, the law is really giving a lot of advantage. I mean, as compared to the SMEs, the investment in SMEs, the investment in startups is really benefiting today. I mean, with some facility in terms of regulation. For example, the convertible bonds in the SMEs, you can never really invest in a new convertible bonds unless, I mean, you exit from the first one. For the startups, it's not the case. You can really have the first convertible bond, you can have the second, you can have the third, you can have a third investor who can really have his own convertible bond. So these kind of flexibility, which is brought by the law, it's really coming from such a critics and such experience lived by Satoshi and similar investors in Tunisia. And of course, these kind of feedback, has been really collected in order really to improve the law. In fact, I mean, Maya can really correct me. I mean, there is 20 new elements has been really put in the Startup Act. I mean, as compared to what really the SMEs are really living, I mean, in terms of all the process of investment, in order really to give the chance for both the entrepreneurs, for the investors, and for the startup themselves, really to see new days where they can really live a better life, I mean, in Tunisia, and also go abroad and to set the base, I mean, for their business, I mean, abroad, and to also gather foreign investors, both in Tunisia and abroad, for their business and so on. So I'm extremely, not because I'm the Director General of Smart Capital, and which is really in charge of all these things, but frankly speaking, I am optimistic because I used really to be also an entrepreneur I mean, in previous life, in the Emirates and in Saudi Arabia, I also in these countries lived some constraints that I feel that within the new ecosystem that we are really, with mechanism, I mean, we are really putting, the things are really improving. Still, there is some problems. I mean, with the central bank, with the flow up and downs from the funds to the startups, from the startups to the fund of fund, and to these things, we are now struggling with the central bank to improve them and to prove, I mean, how to say, a solution, but durable solution for that, in order to allow for funds, Satoshi and similar, to come to Tunisia and to invest in Tunisia. I'm very happy that Satoshi said that within the 4 investments that he's been really doing, 3 of them are in Tunisia, you know.
Great. Thank you so much, Alaya. Maya, I would love for you to jump in and share your perspective on, one, what are the changes that are happening, and 2, what are the best resources perhaps that investors can use to help guide through this process?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that have been raised, and first of all, I mean, there is unfortunately a bad presentation of legislation, of administrative procedures, and it's true that it's complicated. It's complicated, but most of the time also because, I mean, people don't know or don't have the good information. Even though, for example, they refer to capital flows and to the possibility of repatriating dividends in foreign currency, it's possible, and it has been possible for a long time. The problem is that when we don't do the right procedures, then it can be very long after, because then, I mean, if we miss a delay or if we miss a procedure, then after it's much more complicated to do it afterward than to do it before on the. It's true that the platform is still in French, and I hope that the central bank will be convinced to do it in English so that it can capture much more investors. And I have been helping a lot of investors and startups to fill in this platform, and sincerely, it's true that sometimes it's not very easy. But I think it's, I mean, as I said before, there are a lot of things existing. There are a lot of steps that have been done, including with the Startup Act. But I think there's still a lot to do. And that's also challenging. That's also challenging because we are going from a country, I mean, in Africa, let's say we are not, I mean, we are in Africa, so with a maybe complex legislation, with a legislation which is changing. So, I mean, the Startup Act was the first step. And at the time of the Startup Act, there were also other measures that have been presented and that haven't been adopted yet, and I hope they will be. Satoshi referred to the convertible bonds. Indeed, I mean, it's possible to do convertible bonds in Tunisia. Of course, there are some conditions. A first opening was done in the Startup Act, but then another law was prepared at the time of the Startup Act with new financial instruments and also a new form of companies, the SAS, more simplified company. Unfortunately, the law is not yet adopted. It's still under discussion at the Ministry of Justice. I mean, when we compare, indeed, in Europe, we use much more preference shares, in the US as well. I mean, so we are struggling, we are still struggling with the administration to make them understand that, I mean, if we really want to build a startup nation, everything has to follow, and including the legislation, including the laws. So, I mean, I think it's a great initiative, these panels, and also the what Satoshi said, what Yahya said, also in order to understand that I mean the way is still long and there is still to do. A lot of things have been done, but indeed, I mean, I hope that the administration, including the central bank, will hear to these types of panels, so that we'll understand that they have to open more and they have to do more efforts in order to for the country not to be only an MVP country, but also a place where startup can grow and can be a place for startups going international. I mean, there are indeed some things in the Startup Act for the account to be open in foreign currency, and also the possibility for startup to expand internationally using the funds on the startup accounts, which is freely transferable, that can be freely used. There is also another law that was voted 2 years ago, allowing for funds to be created in Tunisia without any constraint, without any ratio, and that can be opened as well in foreign currency, and that can invest in Tunisia and that can invest also abroad. So, I mean, you know, the law is always I mean, not the last step too, but I mean, there are some improvement that have been done, and still other improvements to be done. There are also a lot of projects that are under discussion. The government is also working on a huge project on authorization, in order to build a platform for investors, in order to show much more clearly the different authorizations and specifications that are applicable. But also they are discussing of canceling certain authorizations in order to open more the economic sectors.
Got it. Great. Thanks so much, Maya. Yeah, I think, you know, regulation is always evolving, and it's great to see, you know, the regulation being more agile and taking into consideration feedback. So very curious to see where the economy grows. We believe in the economy, and I think everyone in this panel does as well. So glad to see that thought and that input. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. We've only gotten one question so far, whether the new elements provided by the Startup Act are applicable for investments that are not labeled as startup. I believe that's not true, but that companies can apply to be labeled as a startup within certain rules and requirements. But before we wrap up, maybe to end on a bright note, maybe if everyone could provide sort of a quick statement on why investors should look at Tunisia as a potential investment opportunity. Yeah, maybe we start with you.
Honestly, it's many things, but if anything, it's probably the people. And I think, I mean, being here for 4 years and working with a lot of youth and seeing a lot of talents going and coming through Go My Code. Today, like, we trained around 10,000 students combined since the creation, and seeing kids who are like 14 years old and like from the age of 8 years old coding and like building stuff. And I can tell that a lot of, there's gonna be a lot of entrepreneurs in Tunis coming in the upcoming years. And I think it's, you can think about Tunis now as a very untapped country, or the 80s, 90s in the Silicon Valley, where there is a lot of potential. And if only entrepreneurs had the resources and had the...
I think we lost his sound. But I think we got Yahia's message on the potential, and I agree, finance is a huge barrier to growth for a lot of these companies. Maybe Zia, if you want to jump in next.
Yes, just few words about at the level of promotion. Actually, what we did at FIPA as a pitch to present the Startup Act, I think the most important thing, and it's a pragmatic way to promote it, is it's a law. It's a public-private law, and I think it's very impactful for investors. What I think also that the fact that Tunisia has a long tradition of export-oriented strategies. Actually, this strategy begins in the late 70s with the law called the Law 72. And this strategy gives the country the opportunity to have even more the possibility to profit now after the pandemic of this movement of relocalization for industry mainly, but also IT services.
Thank you, Ziad. Alaya?
So sorry, I lost internet. Somehow I lost internet, so it won't go. Yeah.
Alaya, you're on mute.
Yeah. So thank you. So are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Okay. In fact, I would like really to jump with what Ziad has been really saying about the La Loi 72, the Law 72. In fact, today Tunisia is doing practically the same thing. You know, in 1972, Tunisia needs an industrial shift, changing from agriculture to industry, and they prepare 3 pillars. The first one is the law. The second one is the funding, the FOPRODI, which is a fund, the public-private fund, in order really to help the equity of the entrepreneurs to create their own companies. And the third is the ecosystem through the industrial zones in Tunisia. Now we are almost in the same thing, but we are doing it differently. The first is Startup Act. It's a brand new, it's a really revolutionary, law and framework, legal framework, which really give incentives both for investors, entrepreneurs, etc., really to create technology. The second is a fund of funds labeled in euro, unique. It's completely different, which is really matching your target, which are the startups, the technology, and so on. And the third is the ecosystem, but now not industrial zones, but the incubator, accelerator, the startup studio, etc. So Tunisia is really going with the move, with the trend, the international trend, and also with the dynamism of its youth. So Tunisia is today, if you are asking the question, what really make you come to Tunisia? Me personally, I say youth, and also the perseverance and the commitment of the youth. In 2010, I created a foundation called Youth for Science Foundation, which to help really young students from the age of 8 till the age of 18 to develop their technology. And today, our kids, I call them my sons and daughters, they are today in Harvard and Stanford, and after really making all the process of the science camp, science seminars, etc. And so this is something which really giving us a lot of hope.
Great, thanks so much, Alaya. I know we're coming up close to the end, but maybe Maya, and then we'll wrap up with Satoshi. That would be great.
The thing that maybe I'll say is that I think it's a good country when you have a global picture to come. The advice that I will give is just to be cautious at the beginning, to look at everything, and to go step by step, to be aware of the different procedure, to ask also the administration. And then I think also because there are a lot of positive things, there are a lot of things existing, but maybe that we don't know at the beginning. So to be well advised from the beginning.
Thank you, Maya. And last but not least, Satoshi.
Yeah, I think all of you talked about investor friendliness of Tunisia from legal and framework perspective, but actually you should be confident that the Tunisia is one of the most friendly country to the foreigners. I have traveled to more than 95 countries, and Tunisia is like one of the top 3 countries where people have great hospitality. So, you know, it's investor friendliness is not just about legal framework, it's more about people. So I think Tunisia is a great country. And also on top of that, as I talked at the beginning of this panel, Tunisia is a gateway to MENA region and Africa. And also, you know, you're connected to Europe. So this is a great location. So.
本当にありがとう。本当にありがとう。
Yeah, I was checking your LinkedIn and I saw you studied in Hiroshima University, right?
Yes. Wow. Yeah, thank you. 本当に心からありがとうございます。
Great. Well, on that great note, thank you all for the time. And it's been a pleasure discussing with you all. And we hope that all the investors have found the conversation insightful. If you have any follow-ups, please feel free to reach out to us at tunisia@crossboundary.com, and we will connect you to the right people and hopefully help facilitate transactions in the country. Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you
so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Yeah.